My phone started going crazy at 1 a.m. on a Thursday night. 97 missed calls. The family group chat I'd been muted in for years suddenly had 143 new messages. Voicemails from people who hadn't spoken to me since 2018. My mom called 16 times in a row. My dad texted me in all caps. My sister Sophia left a voice message that was just her crying. And you know what? I turned my phone off and went back to sleep because I'd been waiting 6 years for this exact moment. Let me back up. In 2018, I was 24, and my restaurant partnership collapsed. Not because I screwed up. My business partner, Albert, yeah, same name as my dad, weird coincidence, emptied our accounts and disappeared. I lost everything. My apartment, my car, my savings. I moved back home temporarily while I sorted things out and looked for work. I asked my family for help, not money, just support while I got back on my feet. A place to stay for a few months, maybe. My dad, Albert, told me I was irresponsible and needed to learn consequences. My mom, Hilda, said I'd always made poor choices, and this was just more proof. Sophia was getting married that year and said my presence around the house was stressing her out before her big day. My brother Leonard said I was embarrassing the family. They gave me 2 weeks to leave. I ended up sleeping in my car for 3 months, working 2 jobs, rebuilding from absolutely nothing. Here's the thing that really destroyed me, though. They didn't just kick me out. They turned me into their favorite punchline. Every family gathering I wasn't invited to, I'd hear about later through my cousin Addison's Instagram stories. They'd make jokes about me, toast to family members who make good decisions. My Aunt Becky would post things like, "So grateful for successful children," around the holidays. They blocked me from everything, treated me like I'd died, except worse because at least dead people get some respect. I want to be clear about something because I know how Reddit works. I didn't just move on or heal or find peace or whatever. I stayed angry. For 6 straight years, I stayed furious. Every single day I worked my tail off, I was thinking about them. Every promotion, every dollar saved, every connection I made, it was all preparation. I wasn't building a new life. I was building ammunition. You don't forget being homeless because your own family thought teaching you a lesson was more important than basic human decency. So I rebuilt. I'm 30 now. I worked in restaurant management, saved aggressively, invested carefully, got into a good position with a restaurant group, moved up, made the right connections, learned things, put certain pieces in place. Never reached out to my family once, never asked for anything, never tried to prove myself to them, just waited. Because I knew eventually they'd want something from me. The baby shower invitation showed up in my mailbox 6 weeks ago. Not even a real invitation. Sophia had my cousin Addison text me the details. First contact in 6 years, and it was basically, "You can come if you want, but don't make it weird." The message made it clear this was my sister being generous, throwing me a bone, giving me a chance to rejoin the family if I acted grateful enough. The shower was at my parents' house. Saturday afternoon 2 weeks ago. I showed up in my 2016 Toyota. Nothing fancy because I wanted them to think I was still struggling. Wore my most worn-out jeans and an old jacket. Hadn't shaved in a few days. Played the part they expected perfectly. The look on my Aunt Becky's face when I walked into the backyard was worth the whole 6 years right there. She actually whispered to the woman next to her, loud enough for me to hear obviously. The loser actually came. My mom was standing by the gift table with some of her friends. She saw me and literally started clapping. Everyone turned to look. She announced it like I was entertainment. "He made it. Everyone hide your wallets. Check your purses." Her friends laughed. My dad was grilling and he shouted across the yard asking if I walked here or if I begged someone for gas money again. More laughter. Probably 30 people there all watching this, all thinking it was hilarious. Leonard came up to me with his phone out. He looked at my shoes and said really loudly so everyone could hear, "Still wearing those fake Yeezys from 2019? Can't even afford real shoes?" He took a picture. Said it was perfect when rock bottom shows up uninvited. Posted it immediately. I watched him do it. Watched him type the caption and tag the location and everything. Sophia was in a chair opening gifts, surrounded by people. She saw me and her smile disappeared. She told me I could leave after cake, that I shouldn't touch anything expensive, that this wasn't my pity party. The women around her laughed. One of them said something about how generous Sophia was to even let me come. Another said I should be grateful for the invitation. My sister just sat there nodding like, "Yeah, exactly. Be grateful." I stood there taking it all in. Every face, every laugh, every nasty comment. My Aunt Becky was recording parts of it on her phone. My cousin Addison was laughing with her friends. These were people who'd known me my entire life, people who'd watched me grow up, and they'd spent 6 years perfecting their jokes about my suffering because it made them feel superior. The thing is, I wasn't hurt. I wasn't embarrassed. I'd spent 6 years imagining this exact scenario and dozens like it. I knew they'd be like this. I'd been counting on them being exactly this horrible, this confident, this secure in their position above me. Their cruelty was actually necessary for what I had planned. I walked over to the gift table. Everyone was watching now, probably expecting me to leave or make a scene or apologize for existing. I pulled a plain white envelope from my jacket pocket. No card, no wrapping, just a standard letter envelope. I placed it carefully on top of the other gifts, said congratulations to Sophia, turned around and walked straight back through the house and out the front door. Didn't look at anyone, didn't respond to the few comments thrown at my back. Got in my car and drove away. The drive home took 40 minutes. I got back to my apartment, made dinner, watched some shows, went to bed around midnight. Normal Thursday night. Well, technically Friday morning by then. My phone started vibrating nonstop at 1:03 a.m. I woke up to the screen just lighting up over and over. Call after call after call. I picked it up and saw my mom's name, my dad's name, Leonard, Sophia, Becky, Addison, numbers I didn't even recognize. The family group chat, the one I was still technically in but had muted in 2018, was going absolutely insane. I scrolled through the messages. My mom was typing in all caps. "Where are you? Call me right now. This isn't funny, Maxwell." My dad sent me 15 texts in a row, each one more frantic. Sophia was begging me to answer. Leonard said we needed to talk immediately. Becky was demanding I explain myself. Addison sent me a paragraph about family and responsibility and how I needed to fix this right now. The voicemails were even better. My mom crying, saying how could I do this to them? My dad's voice shaking, I'd never heard him sound like that, saying I needed to call him back immediately, that this was serious, that I couldn't just do something like this and disappear. Sophia sobbing that she was pregnant and I was stressing her out and I needed to stop whatever I was doing. Leonard trying to sound calm, but I could hear the panic underneath, saying we could work this out if I just called him back and explained. I listened to all of them, read every text, watched the group chat scroll by with message after message of pure panic, and then I turned my phone off completely, went back to sleep. Best rest I'd had in 6 years. Because here's what they didn't know. That envelope wasn't a gift. It wasn't money or a card or anything sentimental. What was in that envelope was something I'd spent the last 6 years carefully, methodically, legally putting together. Something that wouldn't hurt me at all, but would absolutely destroy the comfortable little life they'd built while using me as their punching bag. They wanted to treat me like I was nothing. Like I'd never recover? Like I was the family embarrassment to joke about forever? Fine. Let's see how they handle being on the other end of it. Update 1. Okay, so the comments on my last post were wild. Half of you are demanding to know what was in the envelope, the other half are making bets about what I did, and someone suggested I put a glitter bomb in there, which honestly would have been hilarious but way less effective than what I actually did. Buckle up, because this got so much messier than even I anticipated. I turned my phone back on Friday morning around 10 a.m., 23 hours of silence on my end. The notifications were absolutely insane. Over 300 texts, 200 missed calls. The family group chat had basically melted down. But here's what was interesting. The tone had shifted completely overnight. Thursday night at 1 a.m. It was all panic and demands. Call us right now, explain yourself, fix this immediately. By Friday morning, it was bargaining. My mom sent me a long message about how we're family, and family works things out. Leonard texted that he wanted to meet and talk like adults. Sophia sent me a paragraph about her pregnancy hormones and stress, and couldn't we please just discuss this calmly? My dad, who'd been leaving angry voicemails 12 hours earlier, suddenly texted asking if I was doing okay and could we grab lunch somewhere. The shift from demands to negotiations told me everything I needed to know. They'd spent the night reading what was in that envelope over and over, making calls, maybe talking to people who knew more than they did, and they'd realized they were in serious trouble. I texted my mom back, told her I was free Saturday afternoon if they wanted to come by my place. All of them, together. She replied in under a minute saying yes, they'd all be there, what time works for you? I gave them my address and 2 p.m. The address alone probably threw them. I live in a pretty decent apartment complex on the north side, 2-bedroom place, nothing fancy, but definitely not the struggling situation they'd imagined I was in. Saturday rolled around and they showed up exactly on time. My parents, Sophia with her husband Nelson, and Leonard. Aunt Becky tried to come too, but I specifically texted that it was immediate family only. Apparently that started a whole separate fight because Becky was texting my mom demanding to know what was happening and why she was being excluded. They stood in my living room looking around like they were at a museum. My mom kept glancing at my furniture, my TV, the kitchen. Leonard walked in and I watched him taking inventory of everything. Sophia sat down on my couch without asking, her hand on her stomach like her pregnancy was a shield. Nelson just looked uncomfortable, like he knew he shouldn't be there. My dad was the first one to actually speak. He asked if we could all sit down and talk about the situation rationally. Very calm, very measured, like he was in a business meeting. I stayed standing, told them they could sit if they wanted, but I was fine where I was. Mom started with the whole family speech. How we've had our differences, but we're still family, and family doesn't do things like this to each other. How she knows they weren't perfect, but they'd always tried their best. How whatever happened in 2018 was unfortunate, but it was time to move past it and focus on the future. She actually used the word unfortunate. 6 years of treating me like garbage, and she called it unfortunate. I asked her if she wanted to be specific about what this was referring to, just to make sure we were all on the same page about what situation we were discussing. My dad jumped in, said they were talking about the documentation I'd left at the baby shower, the papers in the envelope. He said he wanted to understand my thinking and what I hoped to accomplish, because surely there was a better way to handle family disagreements. So here's what was in the envelope, and yeah, I'm going to make you wait a bit longer because I want you to understand the full context of how I set this up. Back in 2019, about 8 months after they kicked me out, I found out through a mutual contact that my parents were having serious financial problems. My dad's contracting business had taken some hits, some bad investments, regular middle-class money stress. Nothing catastrophic, but enough that they were behind on their mortgage payments. I didn't do anything with that information right away, just filed it away. Kept tabs on it periodically over the years through public records. Mortgage filings are public information. You can look up anyone's property records online. By 2021, they'd missed enough payments that the bank had started foreclosure proceedings. They managed to work something out, got on a payment plan, but they were drowning. Here's where it gets interesting. In 2022, their mortgage got sold to a property investment company. This happens all the time, my voice. Banks bundle mortgages and sell them to investors who then collect the payments. Completely legal, completely normal. The investment company that bought their mortgage happened to be one that I'd been watching because I'd been preparing for an opportunity like this for years. I had money saved, I had good credit, I had connections in the industry from my restaurant work. You meet a lot of people in 6 years, and I'd made it my business to meet the right one. In early 2023, I approached the investment company about purchasing specifically flagged high-risk mortgage contracts. Took me 4 months of negotiations and paperwork, but I bought a small portfolio of troubled mortgages, including the one on my parents' house. The envelope contained notification that their mortgage had changed hands again, that as of 2 weeks ago, I was now the legal holder of their home loan. Every payment they made went to me. Every missed payment was my decision whether to pursue foreclosure. I owned their debt, the house they'd kicked me out of, the house where they'd hosted that baby shower and humiliated me in front of 30 people, the house they thought was their secure little kingdom. I could take it from them whenever I wanted. My dad went pale when I laid this all out, started trying to explain that this wasn't legal, that I couldn't do this, that there were laws against this kind of thing. I pulled out my phone and showed him the documentation, all of it properly filed, all of it completely legal, all of it ironclad. He kept saying there had to be something wrong with it, some mistake, because how could I possibly have the money for something like this? That's when Leonard figured it out. He asked how much I was making, what I'd been doing for work all these years. I told him I was a regional operations manager for a restaurant group, had been for 3 years. Before that, I'd worked my way up from server to assistant manager to general manager. 80-hour weeks for 6 years straight. Every promotion, every raise, every bonus going straight into savings and investments. Living cheap, spending nothing, building capital for exactly this moment. Mom started crying. Not the manipulative crying, real tears. The kind where someone realizes they've completely miscalculated. She said they'd thought I was struggling, that I was barely getting by, that the whole family had assumed I never recovered from 2018. I asked her why they'd assumed that instead of, I don't know, actually asking me. Radio silence for 6 years and they just figured I'd stayed broken. Sophia spoke up for the first time, said this was crazy, that I couldn't seriously be planning to take their house over what? Some jokes? Some rough times? She was pregnant. Didn't I care about that at all? Did I want her baby to be born into this kind of family chaos? And this is where I finally let myself show a little of the anger I'd been sitting on for 6 years. I asked her if she remembered what she'd said to me at the shower. You can leave after cake. Don't touch anything expensive. This isn't your pity party. I asked her if she remembered posting pictures from family events I wasn't invited to, captions about being grateful for her real family. I asked her if she'd thought even once about where I was sleeping in 2018 when they kicked me out with 2 weeks' notice. She tried to defend it, said I'd made my own choices that led to that situation, that they'd been trying to teach me accountability. Leonard backed her up, said enabling bad behavior doesn't help anyone, and they'd thought they were doing the right thing. My dad agreed, said sometimes tough love is necessary even if it seems harsh in the moment. Not a single apology, not one admission that maybe, just maybe, they'd gone too far. They were still trying to justify it, still trying to frame my homelessness as a learning opportunity they'd generously provided. Nelson, Sophia's husband, cleared his throat, asked what I wanted from this situation. What would make me satisfied? Was this about money? About getting them to acknowledge something? What was the end game here? I told him I'd spent 6 years as their punchline, 6 years being the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale, the loser who couldn't get his life together. They'd built their family identity partly on being better than me. And now? Now I held all the cards, and they were sitting in my apartment begging me to explain my thinking. My mom asked if I was going to foreclose, if I was actually going to take their house. I told her that depended entirely on them. See, here's the thing. I'm not interested in forgiveness or reconciliation or any of that healing nonsense Reddit loves so much. But I am interested in watching them squirm, watching them realize that actions have consequences, watching them try to figure out how to fix something they can't fix with money or status or dismissiveness. Leonard said I was being vindictive. I agreed completely. Yeah, I'm being vindictive. You spent 6 years being cruel for entertainment, and I spent 6 years preparing to return the favor. Difference is, my version is legal and permanent. They left around 5 p.m., 3 hours of circular arguments and justifications, and them trying to find an angle that would work. Before they went, my dad asked what my terms were, what I wanted in exchange for transferring the mortgage back to reasonable terms. I didn't answer, just told them I'd be in touch. The family group chat has been absolutely nuclear since then. My mom posting long messages about betrayal and how family should support each other. Leonard saying, I've crossed a line and there's no coming back from this. Sophia alternating between angry rants and guilt trips about her pregnancy. Aunt Becky, who apparently got the full story from my mom, sending me nasty messages about being petty and small. Here's the really interesting part, though. They're starting to turn on each other. Leonard and Sophia got into it in the group chat about who pushed for kicking me out in 2018. My dad and mom had a whole argument via text about whose business decisions led to their money problems in the first place. Becky's mad at everyone because she co-signed something years ago, and apparently my parents' financial situation affects her too, which I didn't even know, but it is just the icing on this cake. I'm not responding to any of it, just watching the show. This is better than anything I imagined because they're tearing themselves apart without me having to do anything else. And you know what the best part is? I haven't even played my second move yet. The mortgage was just step one. There's more coming, and they have absolutely no idea what else I've been setting up all these years. Update 2. The comments telling me to go easy on them because they're still family can honestly stop right now. Someone messaged me a whole paragraph about forgiveness being the path to peace, and I deleted it without reading past the first line. This isn't about peace. This was never about peace. If you're here for a redemption arc where I learned to let go and we all hug it out, you're reading the wrong story. It's been a week and a half since they came to my apartment, and the situation has gotten so much more complicated than just the mortgage. Remember how I said I had a second move coming? Yeah, so did they, turns out, except their moves were way less thought out than mine and basically blew up in their faces. Leonard showed up at my apartment on Wednesday morning. Didn't call first, didn't text, just knocked on my door at 7 a.m. I was getting ready for work, and there he was in the hallway looking like he hadn't slept. He said we needed to talk, just the two of us, brother to brother. I almost closed the door right there because the brother to brother thing was rich coming from someone who'd spent 6 years pretending I didn't exist. I let him in anyway because I wanted to hear what angle he was going to try. We stood in my kitchen, and he launched into this whole speech about how he'd done some thinking, how he understood why I was angry, how the family had made mistakes. Very diplomatic, very carefully worded, like he'd practiced it. Then he got to the actual point. He wanted to know if there was a dollar amount that would make this go away. He could pool money with Sophia and maybe get our parents to refinance through a traditional bank if I'd just name a number. I asked him where he was planning to get that kind of money. Leonard works in pharmaceutical sales, does pretty well for himself, but we're talking about enough money to pay off a mortgage. He got uncomfortable, said he had savings and could take out a personal loan if needed. I asked him if he'd checked his credit recently. The look on his face told me he hadn't. See, here's the fun part about 6 years of planning. You learn a lot about how financial systems work. You learn what information is public, what can be tracked, what people don't realize is connected. And you learn that when someone co-signs a loan, they're just as liable as the primary borrower. Our parents had been missing payments on and off for years. Every missed payment, every late fee, every time they had to be contacted about their account, that affected everyone tied to their debt. Aunt Becky wasn't the only one who'd co-signed things for them. Back in 2020, when Leonard bought his condo, he'd needed a bigger down payment. My parents had taken out a home equity line of credit against their house and given him $40,000, which he'd promised to pay back over time. That loan? Still unpaid. And now I owned it. Leonard actually sat down on my kitchen floor when I explained this. Just dropped right there on the tile. He said they'd told him that money was a gift, that he didn't need to worry about paying it back. I showed him the documentation on my phone. There it was in writing, clear as anything, structured as a loan with Leonard as the co-borrower. He'd signed the papers himself. His signature right there next to Dad's. He kept saying this wasn't possible, that he'd checked everything before buying his condo, that his credit was clean. I explained that as long as payments were being made, even inconsistently, it didn't show as defaulted. But now that I owned the debt, I could restructure the terms however I wanted. I could call it due immediately. I could report the missed payments. I could make his credit score tank so hard he'd have trouble financing a used car. Leonard looked at me and asked why I was doing this to him specifically. What had he done that was so terrible? Did I really want to destroy his financial future over some jokes at a baby shower? So I asked him if he remembered 2018, not just the kicking me out part, the specific things he'd said and done. He claimed he didn't remember details. It was a long time ago, everyone was stressed. I remembered perfectly, though. I remembered him telling his friends at the gym that his loser brother had finally proven what everyone already knew. I remembered him posting on social media about toxic family members and how sometimes you have to cut people off for your own growth. I remembered him telling Sophia that she shouldn't let me come to her wedding because I'd just bring down the whole vibe. He tried to say he was young and stupid back then, that he'd grown since then, that people change. I pointed out he'd taken that picture of my shoes at the baby shower 2 weeks ago. He was 27 now, not exactly a confused kid. He'd had 6 years to reach out, to apologize, to check if I was alive. He'd chosen to keep treating me like entertainment instead. Leonard switched tactics, said he was sorry, that he genuinely hadn't realized how much damage they'd done, that if I'd just told them how I felt they could have worked it out years ago. Classic blame shifting. Somehow it was my fault for not explaining that being homeless and publicly humiliated by your own family was hurtful. I told him I didn't want his apology. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to have your stability ripped away by people who were supposed to care about you. He said that was cruel, and I wasn't the person he remembered. I told him the person he remembered stopped existing in 2018 when his family decided he was disposable. He left without another word. Didn't slam the door, didn't yell, just walked out. That same afternoon, Sophia started texting me. Long paragraphs about how she'd talked to Leonard, how she couldn't believe I'd do this to him, how he'd always looked up to me and I was betraying that. I didn't respond to any of it. Then Nelson texted separately, asking if we could meet somewhere and talk. I ignored that too. Thursday evening, my mom called from a number I didn't recognize. I'd stopped answering their regular numbers. I picked up because I was curious what new approach they'd try. She was crying, asking me to please stop whatever I was doing, that Leonard was having panic attacks about his condo, that Sophia's blood pressure was up from stress, and the doctor said she needed to avoid anxiety for the baby's sake. I asked her if she remembered what my blood pressure was like when I was sleeping in my car in winter. She went quiet. Then she said that was different, that I'd brought that situation on myself, but Leonard and Sophia were innocent in all this. I told her Leonard and Sophia were adults who'd participated enthusiastically in treating me like garbage, and now they got to experience consequences. She hung up on me. The family group chat had been relatively quiet for a couple days, but Friday morning it exploded again. Aunt Becky sent a long message demanding I explain what was happening with her co-signed loan. Apparently, my parents had finally told her that the bank had contacted her about restructuring. She was furious at them for getting her involved in their financial mess, furious at me for buying the debt in the first place, just furious at everyone. Addison, my cousin, jumped in defending Becky and saying I was tearing the family apart over ancient history. That phrase, ancient history, like 6 years of systematic cruelty, was just something we should all forget about. Sophia backed her up, said I was being vindictive and petty, and they'd all apologized even though they didn't think they needed to. Except they hadn't apologized. Not once. Not a single actual apology from any of them. Lots of "we're sorry you feel that way" and "we're sorry things got so out of hand," but Zero taking responsibility for their actual actions. My dad finally posted in the group chat the first time he'd said anything publicly since the apartment meeting. He said that clearly there were misunderstandings on all sides, that the family needed to come together and work through this properly, and that he was calling a family meeting for Sunday at their house. Everyone needed to be there. He tagged me specifically. I replied publicly for the first time in 6 years. Told him I wasn't coming to their house for any meetings. If they wanted to talk, we could meet at a restaurant I chose, neutral territory, and I'd consider listening to what they had to say. Leonard immediately responded saying that was fine. Just name the place and time. Sophia agreed. My mom said, okay. Aunt Becky said she was definitely coming to this one and I couldn't exclude her this time. I picked a sports bar across town for Saturday at noon. Public place, lots of people around, nowhere they could try to corner me or make a scene without witnesses. I figured they'd try the emotional manipulation approach, bring up old family memories, guilt trip me about the pregnancy, appeal to my sense of family loyalty. I was wrong about what they were planning. Saturday morning at 9 a.m., Nelson showed up at my apartment building, alone. He texted from the parking lot asking if he could come up. I was immediately suspicious because Nelson had been pretty quiet through all of this, and him showing up separately without Sophia meant something was going on. I told him he had 10 minutes. He came upstairs, and before he even sat down, he said he needed me to understand something about 2018, about why the family had reacted the way they did when my business failed. I told him I knew why. They thought I was irresponsible and wanted to teach me a lesson. He said no. It was more complicated than that. Apparently, and this was news to me, my parents had been planning to invest in my restaurant. Not a lot, but enough to help with the initial capital. My dad had talked to some people he knew, had vouched for me professionally. Then when Albert, my former business partner, disappeared with the money, it made my dad look bad in front of those contacts. People he worked with in his contracting business, people he needed to maintain relationships with. My mom had told relatives that I was opening a restaurant and they should come support me. She'd talked me up to her friends. Sophia had apparently told her entire wedding party about her brother, the restaurant owner. And then it all collapsed publicly, and they felt embarrassed. So the cruelty wasn't really about teaching me responsibility. It was about punishing me, for making them look bad, for failing in a way that reflected on them. The jokes, the mockery, the 6 years of treating me like a cautionary tale, that was all about their wounded pride. Nelson said they'd convinced themselves that if they stayed tough on me, eventually I'd fix my situation and prove everyone wrong, and then they could be proud again. They thought ignoring me was motivating me. When I didn't come crawling back for help or break down and beg for forgiveness, they doubled down on the mockery because admitting they'd been wrong would mean admitting they'd treated their son and brother horribly for no good reason. I asked Nelson why he was telling me this. He said because Sophia was stress eating at 3 a.m. and crying about how her brother hates her, and he'd realized this whole situation was about more than just money or revenge. It was about 6 years of them never acknowledging what they'd actually done to me. He thought if I understood their reasoning, I might be willing to work something out. I told Nelson that understanding their reasoning made it worse, not better. They'd thrown me away because I embarrassed them, and then spent 6 years convincing themselves that was acceptable. That was somehow more disgusting than if they'd just done it out of misguided tough love. Nelson asked what I wanted then. What would actually satisfy me? I told him I wanted them to feel exactly as powerless and humiliated as they'd made me feel. I wanted them to lie awake at night wondering how they'd pay their bills. I wanted them to walk into family gatherings and know everyone was judging them. I wanted their security ripped away while people who claimed to love them watched and did nothing. He left looking pale. 2 hours later, my dad called. Said we needed to skip the restaurant meeting and talk immediately, just him and me. His voice had this edge to it I'd never heard before. I told him no, that the meeting was happening as planned at the sports bar at noon. He said fine, but he was bringing his lawyer. That was not something I'd anticipated. A lawyer meant they were getting serious about finding a legal angle to undo what I'd done. It also meant they'd spent money they probably didn't have on legal consultation, which told me they were getting desperate enough to take risks. The meeting at noon is in 3 hours. I'm writing this update because regardless of what happens there, I want there to be a record of the fact that I went into this with my eyes open. They're going to try something. I don't know what yet, but my dad doesn't bring lawyers to family meetings unless he thinks he has leverage. Here's what they don't know. I've been planning for this exact scenario for 6 years. Every move I've made has been researched, documented, and cleared by my own legal consultation. Everything I've done is completely, entirely ironclad legal. There's no loophole, no technicality, no way out that doesn't involve them dealing with me on my terms. And my terms are going to get a lot worse before I even consider making them better. Final update. The lawyer thing was hilarious. I'm not even being sarcastic. Watching my dad's face when his legal strategy fell apart in real time was worth every dollar I've spent on this whole situation. I got to the sports bar 15 minutes early, grabbed a table in the back corner where we could talk without being overheard, but still had plenty of people around. My family showed up exactly at noon. My parents, Leonard, Sophia with Nelson, and Aunt Becky, who'd apparently decided she was invited regardless of what anyone said. And yeah, there was a guy in a suit with them carrying a briefcase. My dad's lawyer. They all sat down except the lawyer, who stayed standing like he was about to give a presentation. My dad introduced him as their family attorney who'd been looking into the situation. The lawyer started talking before anyone else could say anything. Very professional, very measured, explaining that he'd reviewed the mortgage documentation and while technically legal, there were concerns about the ethical implications of a family member purchasing debt specifically to leverage against relatives. I let him finish his whole speech. He talked about good faith negotiations, about how courts look unfavorably on debt collection practices that seem designed to harass or intimidate, about how there might be grounds to challenge the sale if it could be proven I'd targeted their mortgage specifically. He said all this while my family sat there looking relieved, like they'd finally found their way out. When he stopped talking, I pulled out my own folder. Told him I appreciated the legal analysis, but I'd had my own attorney review everything before I made a single move. Every purchase I'd made went through proper channels. I never contacted my parents directly about the debt, never threatened them, never violated any collection laws. I bought a portfolio of mortgages from an investment company through standard procedures. The fact that my parents' mortgage happened to be in that portfolio was unfortunate for them, but completely legal for me. The lawyer tried to argue that targeting families showed intent to harm. I asked him to prove I'd targeted them specifically. The investment company sold me 12 mortgages in that portfolio. I could show him the documentation on all 12 if he wanted. My parents' mortgage was just one of several, and I'd purchased them all at market rate. There was no targeting, no special treatment, just standard investment practice. My dad interrupted, said this was ridiculous, that I obviously bought those mortgages because theirs was included. I agreed completely. Yeah, I bought that portfolio specifically because theirs was in it. That's not illegal. That's not even unusual. People buy debt all the time for personal reasons. The law cares about how you collect the debt, not why you bought it. The lawyer looked uncomfortable, started talking about family obligation and how perhaps we could reach a settlement that worked for everyone. I told him I wasn't interested in settlements. The mortgage payments were current, barely but current. As long as they kept paying, I had no legal obligation to do anything. If they stopped paying, I'd pursue foreclosure through proper legal channels. Everything by the book. Sophia spoke up asking what I actually wanted then. If I wasn't going to foreclose and wasn't interested in settlements, what was the point of all this? I told her the point was watching them squirm, watching them realize their security was completely dependent on my goodwill, watching them stress about money the way I'd stressed about having nowhere to sleep. Leonard said I was insane, that this was psychotic behavior, that I needed help. I reminded him about the $40,000 loan, asked if his condo was worth it, knowing he might lose it because mom and dad couldn't keep up with payments on debt that had his name attached. He went pale. Aunt Becky demanded to know what I planned to do about the loan she'd co-signed. I told her that was between her and my parents. She'd chosen to tie her credit to theirs, and now she got to live with that decision. She started yelling about how I was destroying multiple people's lives over a grudge, how this was disproportionate and cruel. I asked her if she remembered posting "grateful for successful children" every Thanksgiving while I was working 70-hour weeks to survive. She said that was completely different. My mom was crying, said she didn't understand how I could be so cold, that she'd raised me better than this, that this wasn't who I was. I told her she was right. The person she'd raised didn't exist anymore. That person died in 2018 when his family kicked him out and then spent 6 years mocking his suffering. This version of me was who survived that. The lawyer tried to regain control, said perhaps we could discuss specific terms. What would it take for me to transfer the mortgages back to a traditional lender? Name a price, lay out conditions, let's find a resolution. I told him there was no price. I didn't want their money. I wanted them to understand what they'd done to me, and money couldn't buy that understanding. My dad finally lost it, started yelling about how he'd tried to teach me responsibility, how I'd embarrassed the family with my failure, how I'd made him look like an idiot in front of his business contacts. There it was. Nelson had told me the real reason, but hearing it from my dad's own mouth was something else. He was still justifying it, still defending the 6 years of cruelty as somehow my fault. I asked him if it was worth it, if maintaining his reputation was worth losing his house. He said I wouldn't actually go through with foreclosure, that I was bluffing, that when it came down to it, I wouldn't destroy my own family. I pulled out my phone and showed him the foreclosure paperwork I'd already had drafted, just waiting for my signature and filing. Told him I'd been ready to file it for 8 months, and the only reason I hadn't was because I was enjoying watching them panic more than I'd enjoy actually taking the house. Sophia grabbed her purse and stood up, said she was done with this, that she was pregnant and didn't need this stress, that I was clearly too damaged to reason with. Nelson put his hand on her arm, but she pulled away. She told me I'd better hope I never needed anything from this family again, because after this, I was dead to all of them. I told her I'd been dead to them since 2018. I was just making it official now. She left. Nelson followed her after giving me this look, like he felt sorry for me. I didn't want his pity. Leonard asked what it would take for me to let go of his loan, just his portion, separate from our parents. He'd find a way to pay me directly, work out a payment plan, whatever I wanted. I told him the same thing I'd told the lawyer. I didn't want his money. I wanted him to wake up every day for the next few years wondering if this would be the day I decided to call his loan due. I wanted him to feel that anxiety constantly, the way I'd felt it sleeping in my car wondering if I'd make it through winter. My dad said I was sick, that I needed professional help, that holding on to anger like this was destroying me. I told him I'd never felt better in my life. 6 years of planning and preparation, and it was all coming together exactly how I'd imagined. I wasn't being destroyed by anger, I was being fueled by it. Aunt Becky tried a different approach, said family was supposed to forgive each other, that everyone makes mistakes, that I was throwing away relationships over something that happened years ago. I asked her what exactly they'd done to earn forgiveness. She couldn't answer. None of them could point to a single thing they'd done to make amends. They'd spent 6 years doubling down on their cruelty, and now that it was coming back on them, suddenly I was supposed to be the bigger person. The lawyer packed up his briefcase, told my dad there wasn't much he could do here legally, that the debt purchases were solid and collection practices hadn't violated any laws. He'd bill them for the consultation. He left. My parents, Leonard and Becky, sat there in silence for a minute. Then my dad asked me what would happen now. I told him that was up to them. They could keep making their payments, keep their heads down, and deal with the fact that I owned their debt. Or they could miss payments and deal with the consequences. Either way, their comfortable life where I was the family joke was over. My mom asked if I'd ever forgive them. I told her no. Forgiveness required remorse, and they'd shown zero actual remorse. They were sorry they got caught in financial trouble, sorry I had leverage over them, sorry their plan to embarrass me at the baby shower backfired, but not sorry for what they'd actually done to me. Leonard said this wasn't over, that they'd find a way out of this. I told him to feel free to try. I'd spent 6 years preparing for every possible move they could make, every contingency planned for, every loophole closed. They were welcome to waste more money on lawyers or consultants or whoever they wanted, but the outcome would be the same. Becky said I'd regret this someday. That family was all you had in the end, and I was burning those bridges. I told her those bridges burned in 2018 when they decided I was expendable. I was just making sure everyone understood they couldn't rebuild them whenever it became convenient. They left, just got up and walked out of the sports bar without another word. I sat there for another 20 minutes, finishing my drink, thought about the last 6 years. The car I'd slept in during that first winter. The jobs I'd worked where I was so exhausted I could barely stand. The holidays I'd spent alone, knowing they were all together making jokes about me. Every single moment of suffering they'd caused or contributed to or laughed about. And now they got to experience their own version of it. Not homeless. I'm not that cruel. And also it would be illegal for me to put them on the street without proper foreclosure procedures, but uncertain, stressed, aware that their stability depended on someone who had every reason to want them to suffer. The family group chat has been silent since the meeting. No more arguments, no more justifications, nothing. I think they finally realized there's no talking their way out of this. Leonard changed his phone number, I know, because my text to him bounced back now. Sophia blocked me on everything. My parents haven't tried to contact me at all. Aunt Becky sent me one message yesterday. Said I was a cruel person and she hoped I ended up alone. I didn't respond. Here's what they still don't know, and what I'm sharing with Reddit because this is honestly the best part. I'm not actually going to foreclose on the house. The mortgage payments are barely getting made, but they are getting made, and as long as that continues, I have no plans to take their house. The value to me isn't in actually destroying them financially. It's in the fact that they'll spend years, maybe decades, making payments to me. Every single month they'll write that check or make that transfer, and they'll remember what they did. They'll remember that their son and brother has them completely under his control, and there's nothing they can do about it. Leonard's loan is the same. As long as the payments keep coming, I won't call it due. But he'll wake up every day knowing I could. That anxiety, that constant low-level stress, that's the revenge. Not the actual financial ruin, but the possibility of it hanging over them forever. The $40,000 loan payments come directly from Leonard's account to mine every month. The mortgage payment shows up from my parents' account like clockwork. I get notifications for each one. Every time my phone buzzes with one of those notifications, I think about them making that transfer, watching their account balance drop, knowing where that money is going, knowing they have no choice. Sophia's baby is due in 4 months. I won't meet my niece or nephew. I'm fine with that. I didn't need their family 6 years ago, and I don't need it now. The difference is now they need something from me, my willingness not to destroy them. And they can't have it. They can buy it month by month with mortgage payments and loan payments, but they can never have certainty again. Someone in my last post comments said this would eat me alive eventually. That revenge doesn't actually fix anything. They're wrong. This has been the most satisfying 6 years of my life. Every step of preparation, every sacrifice I made to save money, every connection I built in the industry, it was all leading to this. To my family sitting in that sports bar realizing they'd completely miscalculated who they were dealing with. They thought I was the loser who showed up to the baby shower in worn-out clothes and fake shoes. They thought I'd stayed broken. They built their entire family identity partially around being better than me. And in one envelope at a baby shower, I took all of that away and replaced it with fear. That's not eating me alive. That's the only thing that's made me feel whole since 2018. My mom tried to hug me at the end of the meeting, right before they left. Tried to pull that mom card one last time, like physical affection could somehow bridge 6 years of cruelty. I stepped back, told her she'd lost the right to touch me a long time ago. She cried. I didn't care. The last thing my dad said as they were walking away was that I'd changed, that I wasn't the son he'd raised. I told him he was absolutely right. The son he'd raised trusted his family and believed love was unconditional. That person is gone. The person I became is someone who learned that family is just people who share DNA. And DNA doesn't mean anything when those people treat you like garbage. I'm not writing another update after this. The situation is stable. They pay. I don't foreclose. Everyone lives with the consequences of their actions. There's no dramatic finale coming, no big revelation, no reconciliation. Just them making payments to me for the foreseeable future, while living with the knowledge that I hold their financial stability in my hands. That's the revenge. Not destruction, but control. Not taking everything from them, but making sure they never feel secure again. Every month, every payment, every time they see my name on their transaction history, they'll remember what they did. They'll remember that actions have consequences, and they'll know that the loser who showed up to the baby shower in fake shoes had been planning this the entire time. To everyone who said I should just move on and let it go, this is me moving on. I'm just taking their sense of security with me.